Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. How is everyone on today? I want to bring you a video on reparations for sterilization. In the state of California, coming from Sacramento, California, they're opposed to approve reparations for up to $25,000 to victims who were among the thousands of people, some as young as 13, who were deemed unfit to have children. And this was decades ago. The payments are part of the state's new 262.6 billion operating budget that is waiting Governor Gavin Newsom's signature. Will make California at least the third state after Virginia and North Carolina to pay victims of the so-called eugenics movement that peaked in the 1930s. Proponents believe sterilizing people with mental illnesses, physical disabilities, and other so-called undesirable traits would improve the human race. California's proposal is unique because it would apply to more than just victims of the eugenics law that was repealed in 1979. The state also will pay female inmates who were coerced to get sterilized, a disgrace first exposed by the Center for Investigative Reporting in 2013. A subsequent audit found the state sterilized 144 women between 2005 and 2013 with little or no evidence that officials counseled them or offered alternative treatment. While all of the women signed consent forms in 39 cases, state officials did not do everything that was legally required to obtain their permission. See, we must address and face our horrific history, said Lorena Garcia Zermino, Policy and Communications Coordinator for the advocacy group California Latinas for Productive Justice. This isn't something that just happened in the past. California's forced sterilization program started in 1909, following similar laws in Indiana and Washington, which some of you may be familiar with that. But the California's program was by far the largest. The state sterilized more than 20,000 people, accounting for about a third of everyone sterilized in the United States under those laws. California's law was so prominent, it even inspired similar practices in Nazi Germany, according to Paul Lombardo, a law professor at Georgia State University and expert on the eugenics movement. The promise of eugenics at the very earliest is we could do away with all the state institutions, prisons, hospitals, asylums, orphanages, Lombardo said. People who were in them just wouldn't be born after a while if you sterilized all of the parents. In California, victims include Mary Franco, who was sterilized in 1934 when she was just 13. Paperwork described her as feeble-minded because of sexual deviance, according to her niece, Stacy Cordova, who has researched her case. Cordova said Franco actually was molested by a neighbor. She said her family put Franco in an institution to protect the family's reputation. Wow. So this person had to suffer because the family wanted to protect their reputation. Cordova said her late aunt loved children and wanted to have a family. She married briefly when she was about 17, but Cordova said the marriage was annulled when the man discovered Franco couldn't have children. She lived a lonely life in a Mexican culture that revered big families, Cordova said. Now, I don't know if it is justice. Money doesn't pay for what happened to them. Do you guys agree with that? Money can never bring, just like they can't bring back a loved one that has been killed, you know, can't bring them back. Money doesn't pay for what happened to anyone that loses a life. But it's great to know that it is being recognized, which is good, but we can't become symbolic. We must make sure that we continue the fight, to use our voices, to continue to fight and to stand up for our rights and our constitutional rights, to make sure that we're being heard. Because if we don't stand up for our constitutional rights, they're certainly not going to stand up for us, and you know that. So we do have to continue to stand up for our constitutional rights. And when other people are not able to stand up for themselves, then we can get involved to stand up for them as well. So she actually has advocated for the state to pay survivors For me, this is not about the money. This is about the memory. And so relatives of hers aren't eligible for the payments. Only direct victims are eligible for the payments. Sterilizations in California prisons appear to date to 1999, when the state changed its policy for unknown reasons to include a sterilization procedure known as tubal ligation as part of inmates' medical care. And I do remember that back in 1999, they were forcing inmates to get tubal ligations. And I do recall that very well. There was a big controversy about that. And over the next decade, women reported they were coerced into this procedure, with some not fully understanding the ramifications. Because some of them, while they were inmates, the women was forced, they were coerced and forced, and they really didn't understand everything that was going on. So a state law passed in 2014 bans sterilizations for the purpose of birth control at state prisons and local jails. The law permits sterilizations that are medically necessary, such as removing cancer, and requires facilities to report each year how many people were sterilized and for what reason. That's very important, because if they're just sterilizing people and they're not being held accountable with audits and statistics and numbers, on what the reason, and documentation, appropriate documentation on what the reason is, then yes, they need to be held accountable, because if they're not being held accountable to these standards, they can just keep getting away with it. And you've known in the past where sometimes paperwork is misscrewed, and is, paperwork is modified and adjusted to fit their narratives and to cover up things than to do the right thing. So questionable sterilizations also occurred in facilities run by local governments. In 2018, the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors apologized for the more than 200 women who were sterilized at the Los Angeles USC Medical Center between 1968 and 1974. And those people are not eligible for reparations under California's program. So I wonder what really happened with those people that were sterilized, and they're not going to, get reparations under this program that California has adopted. But advocates say they hope to include them in the future. It's only the beginning, said State Assemblywoman Wendy Carrillo, a Democrat from Los Angeles, who has been advocating for reparations. I can't imagine the trauma, the depression, the stress of being incarcerated, being rehabilitated, and trying to start your life again in society, wanting to start a family, only to find out that the choice was taken away from you. Can you imagine if you get married, you don't know that you've been sterilized, or you don't know what transpired, you can't have children, and then come to find out that you're trying to have a child with your spouse and you cannot do that? That can bring a lot of, contention and confusion to the relationship. And some relationships may not have lasted, or may have not lasted because, or may or may not have lasted because of finding something out where you would think your husband would want to have children, and it could be very devastating when you want to start a family with your spouse, your husband, and then talking about heterosexual relationships, and you are sterile. So of the people California sterilized under its old eugenics law, just a few hundred are still alive, according to research conducted by California Latinas for Reproductive Justice, including the inmates who were sterilized most recently. The group estimates more than 600 people would be eligible for reparations, but finding them will be difficult. The group estimates only about 25% of eligible people, will ultimately apply for reparations and be paid. California's Victim Compensation Board will run the program with $2 million to find victims by advertising and pouring through state records. The state also set aside $1 million for plaques to honor the victims, leaving $4.5 million for reparations. So this story has come out of ABC 7, 7 News, and it's the California to pay victims for forced coerced sterilizations. So if you are a victim out there and you went through something so traumatic as this, you may be eligible for reparations. So share the video, please, and get this information out to whoever might have been an inmate at the time, a victim of this, and they were forced or coerced, into getting a tubal ligation, sterilized against your will, This information is available to you, and I thank you for tuning in once again. And hopefully this will help some people or help family members know where these victims are, if they're still, alive, because the payments are going to be made directly to the victim himself, victim herself. So California is facing this dark history of forced or involuntary sterilization. So they are facing that. And there is a bill seeking reparations for survivors took an important step this week. So that's an important step. So for anyone that's out there that have suffered this type of, atrocity, I would say, or, suffered at the hands of something like this where you were forced and coerced, this information is available to you. And I encourage you to reach out, to see what's available for you in reparations. Or if there's a family member, again, that knows someone that's a family member that was an inmate that suffered that, please go ahead and share the video, like the video, and subscribe to the channel. But again, I'm sorry for any woman, any female that was forced and coerced sterilization against her will. And may God be with you. May God give you peace. May you continue your healing. And if you are healed, may you be able to help someone else get through, some healing. And there is, therapy and services available for that. And again, I'm sorry if you have been through any of that. It is something that no one, as a woman, as a female, should have to go through. So God bless you all on today. Thank you for tuning in.